Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's business skills webinar. Very much an informal affair today, but basically following on from the previous mitigation webinar that we did a couple of Fridays back. I think it was around 12th of June. Essentially, the aim of today is to go through some of the frequently asked questions that was received, a quick summary of that webinar to get you up to speed, and then an opportunity obviously to ask any further questions should you wish. We have had some technical issues this morning on other webinars across City and Guilds. Please bear with me if that's the case. Can I just remind you that if you do want to ask any questions, that you use the questions function box and type in your questions there. It would really help actually if you could start the question with the qualification code number, such as say 5528-02, something like. Okay, so hopefully today we're going to be joined by Mandy Slaney, Lead Industry Manager of Business, and Gary Cole, Lead Assessment Manager. As I said, we have had some technical issues, so we might be there, we might not be. Okay, my name's Don Green. I'm sure some of you know me already. Looking at the people online, I do know many of you, and I'm a technical advisor for business. There's 19 technical advisors in total, covering lots and lots of different sectors. So please be sure that if you do work across other sectors, that you get in touch with your relevant technical advisor for further support. Now, so that you can access it under the COVID-19 webpage under the City and Guilds website. You do need to scan through it quite carefully to make sure that you find the recordings. You can see on the right hand side in the slide deck there is a screenshot of all the different webinar recordings, to do with the different sectors. So you can see business skills third from bottom there. So all the sector webinar recordings will be available to view there. So if you've got any questions today, like I said before, please feel free to type them into the questions box. Remember, we do receive so many questions regarding the different qualifications within the business skills portfolio. I'll do my best, and Gary will do his best to support where possible. It might be that we have to take the question away, get clarification from whoever, whether that's regulatory bodies or internally, and then put them on a second. Gary, Mandy, and myself did do a frequently asked questions document from the very first webinar, so I think what the best thing for us to do is to ask. Okay, so there is a large range of support, basically in the form of information on the website at the moment, which would be very beneficial to you. Not just around mitigations, but also around EPA dispensations. And of course, it is stored under that COVID-19 webpage situated on that main City and Guilds website. That dedicated space on our website gives you access to guidance, updates, and links to key information, including from any of our regulators that we use, that we abide by. The website contains details not just around the mitigation, EPA, but also about remote invigilation, about any free smart screen resources that are available, and specific information for the nations as well. So you can probably see there, actually, the link in the middle of the page shows nation-specific mitigation guidance, which would be beneficial for anybody within the nations. So mitigation could be one of 4 approaches. It could be calculate, it could be adapt, delay, or no mitigation. We're going to cover those approaches a little bit further and look at some frequently asked questions around that as well. We do have our sector-specific guides as well that basically map to each sector. So ours being the business skills is up there. So it's a mitigation guide. We're now on version 1.4. So please do make sure that you are using the most up-to-date version. Version 1.4 is the most current. It's a constantly changing environment, so we are constantly updating it. We can't, unfortunately, inform you every time we do update something. They're only minor updates, but it is worth looking at, so make sure that you are using version 1.4 as we speak. We've also got obviously guidance there on determining centre assessment grades for our suite of VRQs. Those are on the website as well for you to look at. Okay, so first of all, in order for mitigation to apply, learners need to be in scope. Which learners are in scope for these mitigations? Ofqual published its decisions following the consultation of the extraordinary regulatory framework, which came into effect Friday, 22nd of May. The aim of that is to provide sufficiently valid and reliable results to as many affected learners as possible this summer. So that framework means we can award results to candidates in scope based on one of the 4 agreed mitigation processes that I mentioned before. So we've got to stress that the ERF is a temporary framework, and it does end on the 31st of July. So these mitigation approaches are only available to learners who are in scope, so who were either incomplete or still registered as of the 20th of March, so they must have been incomplete or registered by 20th of March, and they must have been scheduled to complete their qualification or assessments by the 31st of July. If they are not in scope, if they are, say, not due to complete, say, until September, then that is classed as out of scope, and therefore these mitigation rules do not apply to said learner. So it's also got to the learners also have got to complete the learning program that addresses a significant proportion of the content. So I think one of the questions was, what is classed as significant proportion of a qualification, and we are looking at 70%. So you're only in scope really if you completed 70% of the qualification. If the learners are out of scope, then you've got to continue to offer remote and blended learning where that's possible. Now, we did have a question last time saying my learner was due to be completed on the 1st of August, which is obviously a day after the cut-off date. That particular learner would be okay because they would have been registered by the 20th of March and they would have done 70%. And so, you know, if they are within a few days, then that's absolutely fine. Okay. So let's just look briefly at some of the key dates then for our vocational and technical qualifications for this summer. The submission deadlines then for those qualifications following calculated results, that approach to mitigation, that is actually this Friday. So centre assessment grades must be submitted to us by this Friday, 26th of June, for any qualifications that's mitigation that's following the calculate method. For those following an adaptation approach, claims must be submitted by the 30th of September. However, you must inform us of your intention by the 31st of July to say that you are going to be adapting. For the actual results, functional skills, essential skills, all the approved results should be available by the 31st of July. The technicals at level 3 should be available for centres and candidates on the 3rd of August. Technicals at level 2 and level 2 VRQs, results will be released but restricted to centres on the 19th of August. And then they'll be released to the candidates on the 20th. For using and applying mathematics, sometimes known as core maths, the extended project qualifications and the level 3 VRQs, the results will be available on the 13th of August. Okay, so the calculated grades then, for centre assessment grades, the calculated grades approach is being used in a number of qualifications really, such as functional skills, technicals, maths, core maths, extended projects, etc. Essential skills, obviously, in Northern Ireland and Wales, ESOL, and a range of other vocational and technical qualifications. These are being supported by more detailed guidance documents discrete to each qualification, describing the process in more depth. So the centre guide to submitting the centre assessment grades and the declaration form supports the submission process. In addition, the centre specific guide documents lists out the qualifications in the sector and that mitigation approach which should be applied. Some qualifications are also supported by detailed frequently asked questions, of which we do have. So centre assessment grades are submitted through a tool located within the walled garden, and the centre guide for that process walks you through it, and the usual walled garden permissions apply, so how you would normally access it. There is a caveat there. Some qualifications that have recently moved across to Calculate might not be able to be submitted via the walled garden CAG tool, but I'll come across that in a minute. So that just to advise then that the deadline for submitting all the centre assessment grades is actually this Friday, the 26th of June. Business skills doesn't tend to have a great deal of calculated grades. Majority are actually adapt. So what we're going to do now is, because it's a frequently asked questions session, I'm going to ask you that if you do have any questions, that you type out your questions in the questions box, and remembering to start with the qualification number. So e.g. 552802 are the evolve tests calculate or adapt, for example. And whilst you're doing that, if you do have any frequently asked questions, that is, I'll provide a brief summary of some of the ones that we received last week. So just to reiterate then, there was a change previously to computerized accountant suite 8989, which has now been moved across to Calculate, as has 8992, the awards in customer service at level 1 and 2. So a centre did say to me this week they struggled to use the CAG tool for 8989. It wouldn't accept CAG tool, wouldn't accept 8989 results, the centre assessment grades within walled gardens. And so currently at the moment, we are asking centres to submit, if you're struggling, to submit manually via a spreadsheet. And please do get hold of our customer support for further guidance on that. As I say, if the walled garden is up and running, then CAGs are usually submitted through that tool for any other qualifications. And it should be business as usual. 3473, we received quite a few questions around 3473, which is the Diploma in Business Administrator. Some of you might be running it alongside the 9473 Endpoint Assessment Apprenticeship Standard Business Administrator. So Unit 301 and 308 are usually evolve tests within 3473. Did have many questions that was this calculate or was this adapt? Okay, so we must, I've got to stress there that 3473 evolve tests are adapt, and therefore you do need to inform us of your intention to adapt by filling out the form on our website. And you can see there from the screenshot, you should be able to pick out the centre intention form to apply adaptation is the third one down on our website. The link is there. I will send out the PowerPoint slides out to you today to everybody who's attended, and so you will be able to locate it today. So download the form, make sure that you fill out the centre intention form, and then you can once you've told us of your intention, you can apply adaptation mitigation accordingly. So what I want to do is just briefly run over business admin. Again, many questions around the evolve test. It is quite complicated. Business admin is a hybrid, so that does make things slightly more complicated. 5528 then, the externally marked evolve tests for these qualifications do fall under the adaptation method of mitigation. And the reason for this is that the ruling from Ofqual is that they've insisted basically that if the qualification is competency based, all qualifications must be adapt. So obviously 5528 falls within that remit. So therefore, evolve units are adapt. 4475 does have two methods of assessment. 4475 being the certificate and diploma in business and admin. It does have two methods of assessment, both evolve or assignment based. So if you've completed the majority of units via evolve, then you can calculate. If you have completed many of the units via portfolio, assignment based, then you would continue to do assignment where possible. Okay, 5528 regarding the principal units. Does adaptation apply to the 3 principal units within the mandatory units? It does. However, what we'd recommend is that learners complete the second option of a portfolio where possible. So if it's not possible to complete a portfolio, then yes, you would adapt. You would follow that adaptation route. The problem with that is it's not as straightforward as you might first think, because you must make sure when adapting that all the criteria is covered, the length and breadth of that criteria is covered in depth, which really is quite tricky. Essentially, you've got to follow that adapt unit because calculation is not allowed again down to that off-qual rule because of competency-based units. So if you are adapting, you need to obviously, again, inform City and Guilds that you are adapting. And then obviously you need to look at the assessment methods of how to adapt, which we will cover now. So portfolio of evidence, which is assessing competency. So what adaptations to assessments are allowed? As part of the review of outstanding evidence, assessors really should make best use of existing evidence that the learner's already got to holistically cross-reference criteria where possible. Where there's been, say, an assessor observation across other competency-based mandatory units, then you might use an expert witness testimony to back that up. In these circumstances, really, the expert witness testimony may describe an event which is retrospective, as long as the event took place during the candidate's registration period. You might then add weight to the evidence. A professional discussion would be a worthwhile method, and that would obviously confirm the understanding by that learner. You need to justify that the work submitted by the learner is their own work. So authentication can come from that supporting evidence, such as a witness testimony, professional discussion, for instance, and that will naturally back that up. And you've got to remember that all evidence can be sampled by the EQA. So making sure that the depth is really there and that all criteria has been met and cross-referenced at all times. Centre marked assignments, these can still be taken remotely, but candidates by the candidates. But the issue here is that the centre must have software or processes really that maintain the security of the assessment materials. Got to make sure that that evidence that's been generated can be retained by the centre as well. So how are you going to retain that evidence? And of course, you need to make sure that it's authentic, and that the responses of the candidates are their own. If that's not possible to carry out remote invigilation, perhaps due to the high risk, we'd expect additional authenticity and understanding of any evidence that's been generated. Okay, centre marked assignments. Centre marked assignments, assessing knowledge and understanding. Centre marked assignments or tests with little or no practical. Knowledge assignments or tasks can still be completed by learners, provided the centres have software or processes in place that maintain the security of the assessment materials. And like we said before, that it generates that evidence and that can be retained by the centre. So how is the centre going to retain it? How is the centre going to make sure that the material is securely maintained. So where assessments have been completed after the centres were closed, you've got to really exercise caution there, especially where the evidence suggests a change in performance. And this is a difficult situation. It might be that the learner has improved somewhat, and you need to ask the question, what is the reason behind that? Have they had further support, further help, etc.? So in many cases, it's likely to reflect the circumstances and context in which the work was completed. Was the parents around? Was the siblings around, etc., that could support? If so, how do we validate the authenticity of that work? So centres can assess candidates via oral questioning to confirm their full understanding. But we need to stress really the importance of not sending questions to the learner, because that may be detrimental to that material. It could easily be shared to others, for instance. So instead of that, a question and answer could be used, for instance, over telephone, or Skype would be better, or even better, Microsoft Teams, because the answers can be recorded. Learners can, of course, comment in the Skype in chat functions or in MS Team functions, which can then be authenticated because the session can be recorded. And then the centre's obviously got access to written material throughout. Test content can also be used as a basis, provided that the security of the assessment material is maintained. So it might be that where tests are multiple choice questions, the multiple choice questions have been rephrased into open questions, for instance, and then the learner can answer them accordingly. Where questions have images or tables, these can either be shared discreetly from the test. Alternative equivalent images can be sourced, or the questions can be rephrased around the image, for instance. Oral questioning, Q&A session must be carried out by the assessor, who is occupationally competent for obvious reasons, and in a way that authenticates the responses of the candidate's own. So essentially, these will need to be recorded in written or verbal format and linked to the assessment criteria. And it's really important that it is cross-referenced to that assessment criteria. Of course, centres have got to make sure that IQA processes remain in place. Obviously, you would carry out IQA processes remotely at the moment. Of course, if things are really difficult to carry out and you're struggling to adapt, then you can remember that you do have the option to delay still, and that is a very definite option if the learner prefers to and if time allows you to do so. So if you don't want to adapt, delay is still available as a mitigation option. So before certification, all learners would need to have been observed by their assessor before they can be certified. In all cases, the expectation is that all assessment criteria should be referenced to evidence which has been assessed, and that performance evidence is used for competence assessment criteria. Where a small number of assessment criteria do not have performance evidence as expected, then alternative methods, e.g. Q&A, professional discussion, reflective accounts, may be used to fill gaps. Because you are or should be around 70% of the way through the qualification, then it's a certain expectation that every learner would have been observed already anyway by the assessor. And if not, then there's potentially something wrong there, that you've got 70% or more the way through the qualification and not had an observation. So just to reiterate, all learners would need to have been observed by their assessor before they can be certified. Right, quickly look at the appeals process. There's two different processes, one for calculated results and one for adapted assessments. For calculated results, appeals can be made on the grounds that the City and Guilds did not use the correct information or follow the correct procedures. However, obviously, it's not possible to appeal the professional judgment of tutors or centres because you calculated, essentially. For adapted appeals, it's standard. Please follow the standard appeals process for adapted assessments. An appeal can't be made for what's been adapted for obvious reasons, but an appeal can be made about the final result. Okay, let's now take this opportunity. I'm hoping that we have some questions in there. So bear with me a minute while I try and look at some questions. Okay, there seems to be some in there. So 552812. It does seem that that was a question from Anne. It does seem that that the answer has been already given. What adaptations to units 248, 249, legal text and legal audio are recommended? Can we send students the assignment in password protected email? Bear with me a minute. So the problem with that, Anne, is obviously if you're sending the email to the learner, sending the assignment via email to the learner, then you are essentially exposing that risk of the material getting out, and it could then be easily shared by that learner to other candidates. So that is the potential problem there. Let me have a look. So you might want to consider releasing certain tasks to your learners via a group session, where you can securely display the task and confirm the controls to the learner. Don't devise your own assignment. This would need to be approved by the EQA obviously first, and that would obviously take some time. Okay, thanks, Anne. Sound is sometimes poor. Apologies about that. We have had some issues. Others are saying that they can hear fine. 552812 again, Unit 255. Are there any plans to allow this evolved test unit legal environment to be completed by remote invigilation? A good question. This might not be clear in the mitigation guide. What we'll do is we'll take that away. Gary's already confirmed that we'll take this away and look at it and reconfirm. Apologies about that, Anne. So 5546, learners who have been registered since March but are still being taught but due to complete by 31st of July, are they in scope for mitigation? Yes, they are. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. They'd be considered in scope. That's not a problem. Okay, bear with me. So 5528, please clarify with the centres that if they do not complete the evolved tests, for those units involved within the standards, they cannot complete the evolved test for those in the standards because it's not calculate. It will be adapt, especially the mandatory units. The learners must complete a detailed write-up for the unit instead, which can be supported with portfolio evidence. I've had the questions from centres as to if the learners can just use evidence and avoid the write-up. The mandatory units do highlight a guide to the word count expected. This is a tricky one, this, Belinda. What we suggest is if there's not an alternative, if there's an assignment, for instance, that did that. If not, then yes, we would expect previous evidence to be used, cross-referenced accordingly to the criteria. I am aware of a word count there. I think it's about 3,000 or 3,500. So yes, I would suggest that as good practice. Yes, quite agree that the mandatory units do highlight a guide to the word count. So yes, I would expect that as good practice. What we'll do is we'll take that one away, Belinda, and look into it further and confirm accordingly. So 5530 level 3, version 1.2 stated this could be calculated. Version 1.4 has adapt. Can this be claimed before the 26th of June? Adapt is the mitigation here, as it's competency based. So like Ofqual said, anything competency based must be adapt. You can submit notification of your adaptation to us as normal procedure, and you can do it when ready. You don't have to do it until the 26th of June. You need to do it by the 31st of July. 26th of June is purely for the calculated grades only, and 553003 would follow adapt. This is a question for Penny, I think, would follow adapt and not calculate. Okay, moving forward, a question from Maxine. 552802 or 304 suggests all learners must be observed before certification. That's right. Can the observation be conducted online? It can. It can form part of an observation where appropriate. Depending on the nature of the observation and essentially the action taking place, you might want to back it up with an oral questioning afterwards. An expert witness testimony would be really good to support what's been observed, where it's not been clear, for instance. I'm hoping, Maxine, that you do have some observations prior to lockdown, if possible. That they would be good to use as well. If you haven't, then yes, you can carry out observations, but you would need to back it up to authenticate it. Bear with me. So 3748, this is a functional skills questions. I see an upload button on the estimated results. Is this just if you are struggling to use the walled garden form? Do we just submit individual evidence? I'm not sure about that one, Lisa. I'll have to take that one away. I'll go to the functional skills team and request an answer for that one. If the evolved tests are being assessed by a written assignment, would this need to be recorded as an adapt, as it is a permitted assessment of that unit? That's a very good question, Rachel. I will take that one away also. It is a permitted assessment of that unit. So it's whether or not you do need to give us your intentions of adapt or not. I'll take that one away. We do have a bit of time on that. It's not like it's needed for this Friday, so I'll hope to get back to you as soon as I can. 5528 Unit 301, evolve can in any case be done by an evidence route. If a centre normally uses evolve, but now uses evidence, do they have to let the sitting girls know? Again, that is the same question as what Rachel's asked, and so we'll take that one away. Basically asking whether or not you need to inform us of if it's classed as an adaptation route, or because it's an actual assessment method, are you okay just cracking on? Bear with me, just keep scrolling down. Yeah, Maxine has asked again, can I just clarify one of the last points? Adaptation is not mandatory for learners. They can delay if they prefer. We can extend their end date to do this. Exactly that, Maxine, that's quite right. As I mentioned previously, if you are struggling to adapt, or you do have the benefit of extending contracts, then you may delay as well. It's not the only option. Question from Tony: are any of these mitigations in scope for EQA sampling later on? All these mitigations potentially, all these methods of adapting will potentially arise within the EQA sampling activity later on. So you need to make sure that you've retained all adaptation information. And so when you do have an EQA visit, it is all the evidence is there for the EQA to look at. Rachel again, if we delay and a learner is near their sitting girls end date, would this also be extended? I will take that question away, Rachel, and ask again and get confirmation. I presume it would be extended, but I'll ask the question. There are a few questions up there that I'm unsure about. Again, if I've not read them out, I will need to seek further guidance on them through different departments, etc. They are quite niche, and there are some questions around quite niche qualifications again, such as the legal routes within 5528, the medical routes within 5528, etc. And so what I'll do is I'll seek further clarification rather than give you the wrong information. I'm better off doing that. Okay, so that looks like the end of the questions for now. So if you do have any more questions, feel free to type them in while I finish off the slide deck. So for further advice then, we obviously appreciate that these are difficult times, and apologies that I haven't got all the answers today. But like I said before, I am better off checking with different departments to make sure the information is correct. And of course, that information does change all of the time, constantly. It's a constantly moving environment. This slide, you can see the details of those on hand to help. And basically a reminder of the COVID-19 support page that I mentioned before. It's updated all the time, so please do look at the COVID-19 webpage. If you've got any questions, go through to Centre Support or General Inquiries on the email address. You can phone, but please remember that obviously call centres have limited numbers, and staff are working from home. And of course, if you do phone, the line does cost 7 pence a minute, plus your telephone company's access charge. What we'll do is we will create all the questions, what we'll do is collate all the questions that we've had today and put them into a frequently asked questions document. Instead of creating a second one, I'll add them to the first one, and once they're complete, I shall send them out to everybody who's attended on the webinar today, but also post them in the website along with the others as well. Let's just double check now before we finish to see if there's any more questions. Any news as to when the 5519223 working in the NHS exam will be announced, please? Valerie, I'm not sure if that's a set date assignment, a set date. So having it being cancelled in June will probably mean potentially a September one, but rather than me stick my neck out and say, yes, it will definitely be September or something like, I'll definitely have to go back away and check. 5528, I have a centre which does not plan to use mitigation, but just use a comprehensive range of evidence according to the guidance in general. What do I do if I find they've inadvertently used mitigation, yet did not inform City and Guilds? So anything that is adapted does need to be informed by City and Guilds. Judy, I'm presuming you are EQA there. I'll look into that for you, hopefully for Friday. Belinda, yeah, you've made a valid point there. I think centres need guidance on what is considered adaptation, so needs to be reported to City and Guilds, and what is still usual assessment methods. For instance, usual assessment methods would be if you don't adapt, then it would be a normal assessment method. So that is normally an evolved test or an assessment or an assignment or something like that. What I'll do is find clarification of if you are choosing the other assessment method, whether or not you need to inform City and Guilds. But if it's not one of those assessment methods stated, you definitely need to inform City and Guilds of adaptation. Val said yes, external exam marked externally. So yes, I'm guessing there, Val, that there will be a new date put on. Gary, if you are online, can you confirm or deny or hold your hands up and say you don't know, like me, whether or not a new date will be put on for that particular exam?
Hi, Dominic. Yes, as far as I'm aware, they are going to put on a September contingency exam for some of those medical ones that weren't able to be sat in June. I did speak to the team very recently, and they're starting to, I think, look to communicate that quite soon. So do keep an eye out. If you've not registered for e-alerts, please do so. That's the best way that we communicate. But yes, my understanding at the moment is that they will be offering a September contingency series for those exams.
Thanks, Gary. Much appreciated. Great to have a bit of backup to say September. So I hope that answers your questions, Valerie. Tony, I'd like to thank the team for the efforts they're making to keep people informed and updated so regularly. That's great to hear. Thanks, Tony. I'll feed that back as well across the board. Sue, you put a question in there about 3868. Can EDLS be delivered remotely? I'm unsure on that one, so what I'll do is I'll take that one away. There doesn't seem to be any more questions that have come through, so we will give it a minute. Val has just put, regarding the accepted assessment mechanisms, please can you signal to whom we send these to, so that we can seek approval if other than those cited, so we can arrange these with the students concerned. I'm not sure I understand that question, Val. The accepted assessment methods are in the mitigation document according to what the original assessment method was, and then there's the adapted assessment methods associated too. They are all stored in the mitigation document, and you can use those methods. So probably the best bet there is to make sure that you've got version 1.4 of the mitigation document, which will highlight the appropriate adapted assessment methods for said original assessment methods, if that makes sense. Okay, yeah, for example, Valsa, for example, if the medical audio and medical are assessed by means other than those you've recommended, to whom shall we contact so they consider and approve or deny? I'll have to take that one away, Val. Apologies. I'll take that one away and come back to you. It's quite a niche specialist route is the medical route, so I'll get clarification and come back to you. Okay, if you do have any further questions, please do put them in the questions bank now and we'll pick them up later. Belinda's just put, just to confirm, learners on program that are not 70% of the way through, then this adaptation does not apply and centres must carry on as normal. That's the general consensus. Yes, 70% of the way through, finishing 31st of July, and have been registered by the 20th of March. Gary, can you confirm?
Yeah, so the 70% is not really a strict rule, and the reason we don't really consider it a strict rule is because it can't always apply to all qualifications, and that's why we originally had the 70%, I think, in some original versions of the document or some of the documents across sectors, and it was withdrawn because we got a few queries about, well, you know, we sort of done 65% or we've done 60%, is that okay? And the general answer was, you know, yeah, it probably is okay. But also we found that some qualifications, the significant portion of the qualification, maybe 1 or 2 big units or health and safety critical units, or the mandatory units, and that made up less than 70%, but it was deemed by the industry to be the significant portion of the qualification. So it's a sort of broad guide that we originally went with, and so it's there to sort of help centres get a sense of where they may be, because the idea, I think, is the mitigation should really be used to kind of mop up outstanding units rather than deliver the whole qualification.
Yeah.
Because in some areas it'd be very concerning if you know, almost all of the units or all of the assessments were done by mitigations, and so I think the original approach to it by Ofqual and us is that we envisaged that actually it would be these, you know, a few outstanding units. So that's why it's very difficult with all the qualifications that sit in our sectors at VRQs and all the rest of it to be very, very explicit to say this is the you know, you've crossed the line when you've delivered this amount of it. So we do expect centres to be, I think, mindful about the setup of the qualification, what they consider to be significant or critical, and what's best for their learners, really.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Gary. Much appreciated. Val's just said again, some of my students did not start studying a particular unit until after college closure. We've continued via online learning. I assume, therefore, this is fine. That's absolutely fine. You are just continuing business as usual via online. That's good practice. Yes, that's absolutely fine. Okay, that brings us to a close. Many thanks again for joining. We will collate the questions that have been asked today, and we shall add them to the other frequently asked questions, which hopefully everybody who attended previously will have already got, and we'll send them out to you, and we'll also post them on the website as well. So thank you very much for joining us again, and look forward to hopefully seeing you alongside these webinars again. Many thanks and take care.